Good afternoon. I'm here to talk to you today about the new ABLE savings program. Raise your hands if you've heard about ABLE accounts. Wonderful. So we got a few of you in the room. ABLE legislation was passed by Congress this last December after at least 6 years of work by the disabled community to have a tax-deferred savings vehicle available for individuals with disabilities. So by tax-deferred, what we mean is you don't pay taxes on the earnings in the account every year like you would from other investments. And then if you use those accounts for qualified expenses when you withdraw them, you don't pay taxes on those earnings at all. So it's a way for the federal government to support individuals being more independent and saving for their expenses. Here in Kansas, our legislature passed ABLE legislation as part of House Bill 2216 with overwhelming support from both parties. I think in the House there were only 4 dissenting votes. So I think we need to be thankful to our Kansas legislature for passing that. Currently, this legislation is still on the governor's desk awaiting his signature. So let's start with eligibility. In order to be an eligible individual, you have to be Title II or Title 16 Social Security Act disabled, or you have to meet a certification requirement established by the Secretary. The Secretary here means the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. So we don't know exactly what that certification is going to mean yet, but we believe it's going to be if you would take the disabled physical characteristics of those programs and strip out the income requirements and strip out the asset requirements and just focus on that person's disability, but more to come from the Secretary on that. In fact, for the program as a whole, the Treasury still has to develop regs for this program. The statute comically said that they should have 6 months to do so. I've never seen Treasury pass regs in 6 months. In fact, for education savings accounts, it's been about 14 years and we're looking for regs still. That disability has to occur before the age of 26. There is the certification requirement, and that certification has to be renewed every year. So each year that contributions are made to the account, we need to know that that individual is eligible. Oh, we're not clicking. Uh-oh. Not sure what just happened here. Thank you. I can keep going with that. We're talking about that. One of the real benefits of the accounts is that the assets in the accounts are excluded in means tests for federal programs. This means Medicaid and other programs. So individuals won't be that is the earnings. You pay a penalty of only 10% on that $1,000 in earnings. No penalties for any distributions made after the death of the beneficiary. And there is this odd provision where you can avoid the penalty if you take your withdrawal out of everything you contributed in a year, plus its earnings in that year, before April 15th when it's time to settle up with the government for your taxes. And I think the reason for that is, what if you accidentally contribute to an account, but then you later find out that your beneficiary isn't eligible that year, right? So this is a clawback provision that essentially allows us to call a do-over, give you your money back, give you the earnings on that money, probably give you taxes on those earnings, but we're not going to treat it as an unqualified account. The programs are administered by, in most states, your state treasurer's office, but in some states it'll be other agencies. And we'll set up a suite of investment options for you to choose from. The statute allows you to change those investment options twice per year. So our plan is to put this program out for bid once we have rules and regs from the Secretary of Treasury to help define the scope of that project. Our hope is to have some investment options that include short-term duration savings accounts that will be FDIC insured, but then also some mutual fund-based options, some other options that allow those that have a longer investment horizon to achieve a little bit better return for their investments. Again, the scope of the investments available is going to be dependent upon the response we get from the banking and investment community when we put this contract out for bid. There are a few controls on the accounts. If you're a Kansas resident, That beneficiary must open an account in our plan. Again, that's one of those restrictions to limit the cost of the program. If there were a $14,000 contribution limit and I could open an account in any state I wanted, I could open 10 or 20 of those accounts and shelter a whole lot of assets from federal taxes. So one of the things the law does give us some flexibility to do, however, is to contract with other states. So some of us states are working together to form ideas about how could we create a consortium of a few states in order to administer these programs. And part of the reason for that is if we can pool more assets and more account owners, we can lower the cost for these programs. When 529 education savings plans were first created, the fees and expenses for those were a lot higher than they are today because the industry has grown. She mentioned we had that $4.6 billion in the Kansas 529 education savings program. When you charge fees to account owners based on the assets, a very small percentage of $4.6 billion is able to run the program. When we started the program 14 years ago, obviously, it took a larger percentage of a smaller pool of assets. One other control on the back end of the accounts is upon the death of the beneficiary, Medicaid can come and claim assets in the accounts in order to reimburse Medicaid for expenses that Medicaid has provided. It's not an automatic provision. We're not required to report to Medicaid. However, they are able to come get those assets just like they are any other assets that belong to the beneficiary. And I think this is probably one of the other reasons why Congress required the accounts to be owned by the account owner, so that they would be treated as their assets and part of their estate when it came time to settle up those grants. Our hope is to have a program up and running for beneficiaries July of 2016. And frankly, that gives us about a 6 to 8 month window for Treasury to develop regs to help put some meat on the bones of the project so that we'll know a little bit more the limitations that are imposed upon us. And frankly, there are a lot of reporting requirements. We have to report not only to Treasury, but also to Social Security, Disability Administration Services, and exchange a lot of information with them. So we have to get a better handle on what those costs are going to be. So then after that, it'll leave us, a 6 month window or so to develop an RFP, put it out on the street, get bids evaluated, and select the contractor, and hopefully be ready to start accepting contributions July 1 of 16. We do have some microphones that we're going to run around the room in case you have any questions of me. Again, please remember this was intended to be very summary and overview because there's a lot of meat left to be put on these bones, but I'll be glad to answer what questions I can.
So we have about 20 minutes. Scott's available to answer questions. I'll help run microphones, so if anybody would like to ask a question, please raise your hand high and we'll find you. I'll take the first question over this way. Will you say your name and your organization?
Rosie Cooper, Kansas Association of Centers for Independent Living. When you talked about the penalty to be deducted, I just want to make sure I understood it. What I thought you meant was that if that was deducted from the earnings and tax time, that's how a person could avoid that penalty. Is that correct?
Let me back up. I'll kind of start from scratch on that. So it's when you make a withdrawal in a year, you'll get a 1099 from us at the end of the year. That 1099 will tell you, okay, you withdrew $5,000. 4 of that was what you contributed, and 1,000 of that is earnings. So the 10% penalty would apply to that $1,000 that was earnings. So when you file your taxes in the next year, you'd have to settle up with the federal government at your tax rate plus 10% penalty on those earnings. Now, the rule that I talked about for avoiding that penalty is if you make a contribution in a year in which the individual turns out not to be eligible, in that tax year, or until April 15th, you could claw back that contribution and its earnings, and then you wouldn't pay any penalty at all. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, another question at this table. If anybody in the rest of the room has a question, raise your hand, and the second microphone will head your way.
I'm Dionne Wilson with the Resource Center for Independent Living. I was wondering, where can the investments into the accounts come from? Do they have to come from the beneficiary?
No, anyone can contribute. They can come from anyone. But they're still limited at $14,000 per beneficiary, not per contributor.
Thank you. Okay, other questions in the room? Raise your hands high. I see a hand. Here I come.
Hi, Stephanie Sanford from Self Advocate Coalition of Kansas. And I'm wondering who approves whether the expenditure is disability or related or not, and what that process is going to entail.
That's a good question, and that's a question we're currently asking Treasury. As administrators for the program, we frankly don't want to get involved in that determination. We'd rather that be between you and Treasury. The way that currently works for education savings account is, for example, if I have a kid who's going to college, I take withdrawals from my education savings account, I keep my receipts for my expenses, and then it's between me and the IRS when I settle up at tax time. Okay, you withdrew $10,000 from your 529 account, show me your receipts. And that way we don't have to approve them going out the door before the withdrawal can happen. It's a back-end process between you and Treasury. That's our hope. Don't know if Treasury is going to agree to that.
Hi, I'm Liz with the SJC in Jackson County. I have a question regarding the last statement that Medicaid can make a claim against the account upon the death of the beneficiary. Is there going to be some caveats put in place? I mean, if anyone can contribute, shouldn't it? I mean, I just don't, it would kind of be like even putting anything in there.
I understand that is a provision that causes some heartburn for us, and it may limit family members' willingness to contribute to the account. I think Congress's feeling on that was if Medicaid has provided benefits, that's during someone's lifetime, it should be entitled to some clawback of those assets that belong to that beneficiary. You're right, it may limit family members who are willing to contribute. Family members are just going to kind of have to balance the benefits that the program provides against that negative and decide if the benefits outweigh that negative, and then frankly spend down the assets toward the end of a beneficiary's life so there's nothing left. Unfortunately, that's a rule we don't get to change. That's a rule that is set in statute by the bill that Congress passed. One of those last-minute compromises to try to keep the cost of this bill down. And one of the reasons why this bill bounced around Congress for over 6 years with it, it originally had about a $6 billion fiscal limit, and we got it down to about $2 billion with these restrictions that were put in.
Other questions in the room? Okay, any other questions or thoughts? I don't see any other hands. All right, well, thank you so much, Mr. Gates. We appreciate you being here. Let's give one more round of applause to Mr. Gates for his presentation.